Apparently in the ACT, size does matter. The Assembly looks set to increase its members from 17 to 25. An independent review made the call last year. Labor had supported the increase but needed the backing of the Liberals. Now Jeremy Hanson has given that support and said he will work with the Chief Minister to bring about the changes in time for the 2016 election. Adrienne Francis went north and south across Canberra to get the community reaction.
That's great. Yeah, it should have been done years ago.
I have no idea. I know no idea how it affects us.
I do agree that the workload is high, although I don't know how we're going to fund more places.
No, I wasn't aware.
Is it something you'd be interested in?
No, I think they're already overpriced and there's too many and they do as little as they possibly can.
Just to keep grumbling that we've got too many politicians already, I think that's a somewhat infantile view and we need to get over that.
Thank you, members. Questions without notice.
The size of the ACT Legislative Assembly is set to expand from 17 seats to 25 at the next election in 2016.
We have to grow up politically. We have to own the Assembly. And that means, I think, that we have to support its expansion.
Instead of one 7-member electorate and 2 5-member electorates, there'll now be 5 5-member electorates. The extra 8 MLAs could cost ratepayers around $10 million each year.
Very happy with it. We lobbied specifically to get a 5 electorate model and with a strong emphasis on having local members and a local electorate, and hopefully even having those members having electorate offices here in Gungahlin.
But before there can be more politicians, 3 electoral boundaries need to be redrawn into 5. The Electoral Commissioner says it's likely the districts of Belconnen and Tuggeranong could be split because each now host a population greater than 1/5 of Canberra.
I think it'd be really good if there was a better possibility of people being able to vote locally. I'd probably come into the Woden electorate, so I guess the more electorates the better, because then people get a better voice.
The Woden Valley is currently divided between the electorates of Molonglo and Brindabella, and the Community Council is champing at the bit for change.
There's an interesting link between the neglect of Woden and Woden Valley and the way the electorates work in the ACT. So in one sense you could say we have 12 members of the Legislative Assembly to represent us, 7 from Molonglo and 5 from Brindabella. But in another sense we have none at all because it's very difficult to attract the attention of those members.
When we look at the Woden area, it's quite actually, for services, it's quite poorly off. If you look at Tuggeranong, they have community centres, they have family care centres, they have an arts precinct. So it seems that we seem to pay a lot of taxes in this area, yet get very little services for our money.
We've been quite hopeful that the recently announced interest in increasing the size of the Legislative Assembly will actually create an opportunity, assuming there are 5 electorates, to unite Woden Valley in the one electorate. And then we might get some real focus of attention on the problems of Woden Valley.
Upgrading the interchange would be a good option, and obviously decreasing the vacancies in the offices and the associated commercial buildings would be great.
Well, at the last election we had a couple of local candidates who ran. Unfortunately they weren't successful, so we have no local representation.
The new Nappy Valley of Canberra, Gungahlin, is also split across 2 enormous electorates, Molonglo and Ginninderra.
It's just too big and it doesn't represent what we need out here.
I would like to have more doctors here so it would be easier to get appointments when required, because usually it takes a couple of days to get an appointment.
Despite the growth, there's no guarantee Gungahlin or Woden will get their own electorates in this next redistribution.
We feel as though the current model doesn't take into account the growth out here, so within a year we'll be underrepresented again and we'll have to wait another 3 years before we can catch up.
Both councils are calling for the new electoral boundaries to more closely reflect the natural contours of communities and town centres.
Well, one way of doing it, we would see, for example, Woden and Western Creek being in the one electorate. But as regards the other electorates in the ACT, it might well be necessary perhaps to change the electoral quota arrangements for those, so that although the electorates wouldn't have exactly the same number of voters, that slight diminution in representativeness, I think, could be more than made up for by having this spatial community focus for the electorates in Canberra. I think it would make a huge difference.
There's also been speculation that the new model, with 5 members to be elected from each of 5 electorates, could threaten diversity by favouring major parties.
That could be an issue, but I think the Greens or other parties can win those seats if they have the policies that people want. And to the extent that that change actually puts those parties more on notice, I think it's a good thing. I think it will also mean that the major parties will be forced to take a more spatially focused view of Canberra, start to think about the town centres a bit more creatively and a bit more sensibly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that this bill be agreed to in principle.